I will introduce our second featured reader, all the way from the Pacific coast of the US, from Oregon, John Sibley Williams. And of course, I have a little bit to say about him as well. John Sibley Williams is the author of 7 poetry collections. The latest one is called Scale Model of a Country at Dawn. There's The Drowning House, As One Fire Consumes Another, Skin Memory, Summon, Disinheritance, and Controlled Hallucinations, as well as 5 chapbooks. He has also served as editor of 2 Northwest poetry anthologies, Alive at the Center and Motionless from the Iron Bridge. A 26-time Pushcart nominee, John is the winner of numerous awards, including the Lowell Miller Prize, Wabash Prize, Philip Booth Award, Janet B. McCabe Poetry Prize, American Literary Review Poetry Contest, Phyllis Smart Young Prize, Nancy D. Hargrove Editors Prize, Confrontation Poetry Prize, and Vellum Award for Poetry. John holds an MFA in creative writing from Rivier University and an MA in book publishing from Portland State University. He is the founder and head teacher of Caesura Poetry Workshop, a virtual workshop series, and he serves as co-founder and editor of the Inflectionist Review. He also works as a poetry editor and book coach. John lives in Portland, Oregon. Now, John, I'm also lucky enough to have a book of yours, The Drowning House, and so I decided, because I also had a reflection on David's book, to not dip in and out of your like very many books, but to pick one and sort of delve into that. And I'm so happy that I did, because The Drowning House really is a book that I want to sit with longer. I found it a very rich book where everything is present in something else, and um, death and the dead permeate the space of the living, and behind the profane, we can see the shimmering of the sacred. And of course, the American past is very much alive in the American present in this book, especially in the section My American Ghost. These poems experiment with stories and different versions of stories of how the mythical and the creative can be present in the tragic. For instance, in the poems where minority victims or heroes are juxtaposed with mythical figures or artists. This book deals with gods and borders, with crossings and bodies, and has a keen eye for those most often ignored. And in doing so, these are both engaged and courageous poems. It's a very hard balance, I think, to achieve in poetry, to have both the engagement and the poetry equally powerful, but this book strikes that balance beautifully. Um, and
Well,
of
thank
course,
you. That's beautiful. That sounded like a professional review. My goodness.
it's- well,
That's,
well, you're welcome. Um, and of course, I have the question for you, the beginning of the new year, resolution time. Do you have any specific resolutions or intentions specifically for your poetry or poetry in a broader sense?
sure. Yeah. I guess this past year, for a number of personal reasons as well as cultural here in this country and across the globe, a lot of cultural political reasons as well, of course, of health reasons. And I'm a parent of twin 5-year-olds, so there's that too. So personal reasons. This has probably been in the 21, 22 years that I've been writing poetry. This past year I've written the least. And I think a lot of it comes from the fact that I need to be separated from a situation in order to explore it. I think some poets maybe can just, go with the flow, and be in that moment, whereas I need the hindsight to know what I think of the situation, therefore to know what to write about it. So I've had a lot of trouble being able to get that emotional distance from the language in order to craft it. So my larger hope is that I'll be able to find that space so that I can write a bit more consistently, like I have for the most part decades, but it's really been tough the past few. So I'm hoping to be able to just get into that mindset a bit more, and to be able to release and breathe in order to be able to write better. And I guess more specifically though, one of my twins came out over this past year as transgender. And so my goal is to read more transgender poetry and see how that might be able to impact my themes and my styles. Identity, as you mentioned, in terms of history and culture, identity is certainly very much a part of all of my books. But that specifically, I would like to see how I might be able to incorporate that into my work.
Wow, well, thank you for sharing that. And I really recognize what you're saying about needing to be distanced from a situation. I have it myself as well. And also, I mean, this is a crazy situation. Um, and for me, like 2020 was really productive poetry wise. I don't know where that came from. And then the last year was less so. And I mean, come on, this is wearing us all down. So, but I do hope you'll find that
Mhm.
again.
Yeah,
Um,
I know what you mean. Wearing down is the big thing. When you're just are physically, emotionally, mentally, all three totally worn down. It's hard to find that spark. Even if you're reading literature that you love, it's hard to convert that, convert your emotions into your own literature. It's tough.
Yeah, and I think it's that spark because I mean I can imagine that there are also heavy times, but that you're more adrenaline sort of boosted, but this time feels like a constant flat line. So it's sort of hard to keep your spirits up and your poetry up. But we have poetry lit and we try to light a little light. So with
Mhm.
that, please take us into your poetry.
Oh, well, thank you so much. Um, and thank you for referencing, yeah, the new books there. I do like to start, although that's what I prefer to read from today. I do always start with the same poem as a dedication kind of to my mother, who, from what I understand, used to read to me in the womb. And maybe that's where this came from. I started writing short stories when I was 6 or 7. So I'm assuming that's where that came from. So I always like to start readings with that. This poem is a dedication to her from a previous book. The poem's called Death is a Work in Progress. My mother says fox while gesturing toward an old red wagon abandoned in our yard for decades. Fox, a word so cavernous her entire body vanishes into it. Body of misfiring electrons, scattered images, no contexts. Body that is mainly just a body now. No other animal knows how to be this incomplete. I think if you were a fox, coyotes would have eaten you by now. But I say, yes, I'll climb into that fox and let you pull me through the high grass one more time. Always like to start that with her. She'd had dementia for a few years before her passing, so she was confusing lots of things. But yes, so thank you, Mom. So yeah, I'd like to, if I may, this is just a weird year, I guess, for me, that I actually have 2 books that are coming out around the same time, which is kind of strange. So I think I'll read a few poems, if I may, from the book that you had referenced and made such beautiful comments on, The Drowning House. There you go. So I'll read a few poems from that. And you actually mentioned, I was going to start with this. So you actually mentioned the fact that I have a handful of poems in this and the other collection, in which I'm pairing a historical figure, very often someone who has dealt with much suffering and violence upon them, historically, mainly in this country, and then partnering it with an artist or a mythological figure. So in this first poem, it's called Emmett Till / Edward Hopper. I'm sure most people are probably familiar with Edward Hopper's work, right? And this is something that was always spoke to me, I guess, is in his work, is how lonely all the white people are in his art. You know, the art that I love, his landscape art, but the art that has people in it, everyone is so disconnected. So I tried to connect that in my mind to what happened to Emmett Till. So I know everyone, a very international audience today, but that Emmett Till was a very young man, a boy really, almost preteen, who was lynched for potentially whistling at someone, but probably not even that. And it was an absolutely horrific situation in our country. So partnering that with Edward Hopper's work. So again, it's called Emmett Till, Edward Hopper. In your mouth, 1,000 unpainted churches, steeples snapped off like baby teeth in an apple, rusted bells trying so hard to ring, ringing, crows along your restless edges, where clapboard meets sky and storm. The sky is always storming. Skin can be its own broken republic. Everywhere, overgrown rail tracks and a few white people who don't know what to say to each other. Not anymore. Truth is married to the surface of things. The surface is a lighthouse overlooking wreck after wreck. No ships here anymore. Nothing left to cradle and swing safely into harbor. All sorts of things swing. All sorts of women sit on the knife's edge of a bed, half naked, staring out a half naked window. All sorts of men are tossed over bridges after whistling a little tune. Come back, crows, bells, edges. In you, let the night see its face. Oh, my dog needs to get out. Go, dog, go! My apologies. She was sleeping and then she had to get out the door. But oh, thank you so much. So I do have quite a few poems like that in this collection. This next poem, actually I saw someone ask for page numbers, which is nice. So I apologize, that was on page 7 and this is on page 8. I saw a comment asking for page numbers, which is very sweet, thank you. So this next poem is called "The Dead Just Need to Be Seen, Not Forgiven." This is the first poem I've ever had to get into the Best American Poetry Anthology last year. It's the first time I've gotten into that. Yeah, as you said, I try to deal a lot with history, but also with my part or my assumed part within it, based on my based upon who I am culturally, and in terms of my ethnicity and gender, and trying to incorporate that into my poems. My life has been very easy compared to so many others. And then looking back at history and wondering, hypothetically, what some of my ancestors may have been like. So again, this is called "The Dead Just Need to Be Seen, Not Forgiven." That old man in the photo our family never talks about, known best for tracking runaway slaves. Tonight, we drag him from the basement up these loose wood stairs and set out a plate of salted cabbage and rabbit. So long since I've asked why the empty chair at our table. With all the warmth the body has to give, we give up on measuring the darkness between men. Dust and dusk enter and are wiped from the room. The names we call each other linger, luminous and savage. Still, that tree I used to hang tires from holds tight its dead centuries. The light swinging from its branches we call rope-like, which implies there's no longer rope. Tonight, we'll wash the burnt out stars from his hair, all the crumbs from his beard, the misfired bullet of his voice we let burn as it must. Yes, so much of what I try to do is to try to make connections, as you so astutely put, between the past and the present. The past is never too far in the past. I don't even know if you can almost call the past the past. And I think for my next poem from this collection, there we go. Some similar themes, and this is on page 28, since someone asked. This poem is called, it's a prose poem, and it's called The Moon is Two Half Moons Joined Together. Her body, still yoked to histories retold, so often, even her great-grandmother who lived it cannot remember the river's name she crossed to get here. Tigris, Rio Grande, Euphrates, how the men and more men. And when the men were done, they'd touch finger to forehead, to chest, to shoulder, and zip up their flies. How sometimes the world works like that. The bullet passes right through, and on the other side, another language to learn, another God to feed, and a child that wears half your face. Try not to take it as a sign how they see you, Mama says. The books the kids don't read don't mention it. This name, that first name, the constellations it takes to turn sky into map. How boys still rock, paper, scissor their way to cruelty, which hurts less than their taking her as white, which at least means they love what they see, and a red clay stain that once was a river. Yeah, gender has a lot to do with some of my poems too, partially from my own fears of, what gets passed down generations, and especially some of my poems reference a son, which I never had. I don't want to say no longer had, but she is transgender, so now I'm filled with a lot of beautiful, beautiful women in my house, and which is amazing, and makes me fear slightly more, I guess, for my daughter's future, given the way people are all over the world, and especially in this country. So sometimes that comes out in my poems in different ways. Okay. So I guess the next poem is on page 83. And I actually pulled this from, I pulled the title only from another poem, which I just absolutely adore. This is just a line from a poem. Harps strung with gut still make music after 2,000 years. And that is true. I looked into that. It's just, what a beautiful thought. 12 unpaired shoes hang windless from a wire, threading streetlights together. Eventually, swallows reclaim them. Without the need for twig and try, they raise a family in our cavities. My son points a toy gun at my temple. Each bang reminds me my father was once a mountain that crumbled beneath me. How the sheer terror of cradling so much weightlessness can flatten landscapes, raise cities, or, the birds remind me, return warmth to discarded things. That there is nothing that is not home hurts more than the imagined bullet drilling into my skull. I cannot fail to forgive it. As he tightens his tiny lips and blows through me, finally, I am song. Oh, thank you. And I think, so, and then there was a few poems from the Drowning House. And thank you so much for that. I think I'm just going to finish up with maybe just 2 poems or so from the other book, which was quite literally yesterday. I got my box of, so it's still not out yet, but I got my copies. It's still. So this is a book called Scale Model of a Country at Dawn. So I'll just read maybe 2 poems from this. And just to throw out there, I noticed that you put, thank you so much for putting a link like the order link. I very much appreciate that. And I know this is a very international audience, but just so you know, if anyone is interested, because I prefer signed copies myself, if anyone wanted either of these, you could always email me, because I will throw in an older copy, a book, one of my older books for free. I still have a lot. Yeah. Right before the pandemic hit, I had a big tour. I was driving all around the country. I had a big tour. I had flights booked and everything. Pandemic hit. I got some copies of my older books. So if anyone's interested in either the Drowning House or Scale Model, just shoot me an email, and I'll send you an older book too, of your choice. From Scale Models, similar themes, but a slightly more personal, slightly less overtly cultural and political, although that's still humming in the background. So this poem is called A Careful Study, Post-Mortem. And I'm sure we are all familiar with this idea. Maybe some of us have done this before in school or personally, where you have a butterfly or something similar, right, with its wings pinned open for careful examination. So that's the image, hopefully, in one's head here. No matter how many pins hold it down, the wings tremble. In your mind, still a tempting flight. Like any child, terrified, every body is part yours. Even this strange mess, speckled black and gold, like midnight and the stars that define its edges. That there are edges at all hurts. Shouldn't the dead carry less weight, less expectation of awe? The pages begin to fill themselves. Measurements, comparisons, organs so small you're not sure interiors aren't ash. Like what rests, useless and cooling, beneath the fire your father last night showed you how to light. Mostly, he said, so you won't keep asking when your mother will return. Thank you. Very, very loosely autobiographical, but going camping with my father somewhere around, I used to do that with butterflies. I'm sure a lot of people did. Always found that interesting. I had one of those framed on my wall when I was younger. And then going camping with my father, kind of made up the rest from there. Yeah. Okay, so I think I'm gonna end with, especially given Mila where you're from. So there aren't a lot of the poems in some of these books are particularly American in their cultural perspective. I did spend a few months traveling different parts of Central and Western Europe. So I do have a few poems taking place in Austria, and I have some up in Sweden and a few different places. But this particular poem was written in Iceland. And with someone, I was on vacation with someone who was my partner at the time, no longer. So the dissolving going on in this poem, I think, had to do with the relationship also. This poem is called Forever Daylight. Again, the sun fails to dissolve, and I cannot wash the light from your hair. The world stands excruciatingly visible, stuck in its song. What the night must steal to give us something to rediscover about ourselves never leaves our hands. No gauzy horizon, no ambiguity, nothing to unlearn. We draw the curtains, but even this is a candle. Even the bent heads of ice caps melting, the fjord rising. These sheep are not the dreaming kind. Rugged, furious, walking cliff sides as if water. That something can have no gods at all and still be holy. That we are finally seeing ourselves in the full light of another's eyes and cannot stop flinching. Our throats gone gravel and road salt from all this ceaseless awe. Okay. Oh, thank you very much. And thank you again, Neela. Thank you so, so much for inviting me. It's a beautiful, beautiful reading. And I'll reply to Joanne's email comment there. Thank you so much, everyone. I really look forward to the open mic.
Thank you so much, John. And I'm amazed about how you can have two different poets and then somehow all these connections between your work and David, sort of, at least in my mind. I saw the whole with the immigration and identity, but also with the light. So that was really, really nice to have heard. So thank you. So just one more round of applause. I'm feeling applausy tonight.